Is it as easy as that? Well, not really. Hey guys, MasakoX here. With Dragon Ball Super fast approaching its 100th episode, in fact actually hitting that this weekend, its count in terms of episodes is far greater than that of Dragon Ball GT, and it's actually closing in on the episode count for the original Dragon Ball series, 153. It's been running for over 2 years now, and it's managed to weather many storms throughout its production process, right at the beginning, its midpoint, and now where it is currently. It has made some disastrous errors throughout the time it's been on television, but honestly, I think it has learnt from its mistakes. It has had numerous growing pains, but I now believe that it's gotten into its groove, especially with the Universe Survival arc. So why is there still a divide in the fandom? I've gone over this issue throughout many different videos and bits and pieces, but I now actually wanted to tackle the subject in its own video. What has caused so much vitriol towards a show that was pretty much most of our childhoods? In theory, Dragon Ball Super should be the answer to our prayers since DBZ ended its initial run back in 2003. That doesn't seem to be the case though. Why is that? The biggest factor could be that of time. Dragon Ball Z was our first exposure in the West to Son Goku and his friends in the entire world that they live in. Unlike most shows, its introduction in the West, or at least in America, came in dribs and drabs and in different pacing and different series coming out at different times. Well, Europe and some parts of the US managed to see Dragon Ball Z, or at least Dragon Ball, in the mid-90s, with the former actually getting a more conventional release. That's continental Europe, not in the UK. The years 1998 and 1999 saw the second wave of DBZ in America, and it truly took hold that time. That was a much bigger wave in popularity thanks to the likes of Toonami on Cartoon Network. In the UK, we didn't really get an introduction to DBZ until the beginning of the 21st century, March 2000. I've talked about this many times. Thank you, Cartoon Network, we got it! Eventually. Most of us were between the ages of 8 and 14 when we first saw Goku and Piccolo sort out their rivalry? Yeah, in the UK we never saw Dragon Ball, so that whole thing was really confusing. We didn't get Dragon Ball at all until 2003 when Dragon Ball Z had ended. Then we have that good old televisual nugget, syndication. Over the years, DBZ was replayed on many networks throughout the entire United States, keeping the fandom fresh, as well as introducing new people that might have missed out on the series the first time round. Then of course we got Dragon Ball Kai. Oh boy, did that see another generation of fans come about thanks to the likes of Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon's run of the slightly truncated series and slightly remastered, although that remastering gets less and less and less as you progress. But hey, it also kept the fans interested with the likes of a Blu-ray uncut high quality release. I mean, I must admit, I did succumb to that. But hey, it's pretty awesome. I mean, despite Kai being a slightly cut down version of Z, it's still the same story. It's the same story that we grew up with, just actually kind of cut down and slimmed. It was like visiting an old friend that had been going to the gym, or at least had grown up to be much more mature than you remember him to be. The video games as well caught attention with a whole different subsector of fans, thanks to the likes of Dragon Ball Heroes being a surprising success in Japan. That and the fighting games, you can't forget about the fighting games. That kept the Dragon Ball Z property alive when there was nothing on TV. And then hey, we got the Dragon Ball Z movies, Battle of Gods and Resurrection F. That just was even more success. And it made a lot of people a lot of money. What can you do to top that then? Well, make that series. But when do you set it? We all remembered what happened to GT when it actually took itself into the future, and that kind of fell apart. Where are you gonna put it? Like a prequel? Prequels are a bit hit and miss, as we know. So we have to actually set it when the momentum is positive and there is a big regard for the actual property. Oh yeah, the time skip! Those 10 years between the end of the Boo saga and the end of Z, age 774 to age 784. There's a lot you can do in that time frame. Plenty of material to stick in there. In fact, Toriyama said that this time period would be a perfect place to actually revisit the entire series, as he was in an interview with Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru. They were both talking about different things in Dragon Ball, and then this question came up. I'd like to see that. But in the final chapter, Goku's getting pretty old, and what happens to him after is already covered in the anime original Dragon Ball GT. Still, Goku is the main character after all. If you're going to make a new story without any difficulty, you have to rewind time a bit, and tell a story from somewhere in the past or something. I agree. rather than continuing on strangely into the future or digging deeper, I'd rather develop it with something like a separate episode going back in time to say, there was such and such a story involving such and such an opponent, as in, it wasn't in the comic, but this kind of thing also happened. I think that'd be probably better. Which is what we got with Dragon Ball Super, only in a series form instead of just like a one-hit wonder. Going back in time and recounting a story from that time skip between age 774 and age 784. In essence, Super is like one elongated flashback. You can make brand new stories, but you can keep the same characters that everybody recognizes and keep them in the same garb for the most part, and that's something people recognize. It touches on the nostalgia, and it actually keeps everything within the current canon. Yeah, that could be a winner. Altogether now, marketing! Not only that, but there are new stories that you could do that could be tied up in a nice little bow. It's a nice little 10-episode arc. There you go. Just a nice little story. We got Goku in his traditional gi. Yeah, everything's really good. This sounds like it could please all the fan demographics. Everyone would be pleased, right? Well, not quite. With a brand new series comes a lot more scrutiny. The older fans are aware of what they like and what impressed them as a child, and what they would actually like to see from Dragon Ball is something that could actually repeat those same emotions, bring that excitement back to them as adults. Obviously, they want to experience that childlike wonder, but that childlike wonder is hard to repeat when you're in your late 20s and early 30s. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's damn hard. It just takes a lot of effort, something that Super didn't display when it first started. After the two movies and their profitable runs, Toei felt like all they had to do was just rehash the two movies into arcs, make them slightly longer, and then everything would be fine. There's not that much time needed to actually come up with a new arc. They got complacent. They thought that this would all be enough. It wasn't. Sure, the first couple of episodes were exactly what the fandom wanted, and they were actually pretty good. We got Goku turning Super Saiyan, we got Goten and Trunks having some hijinks, as well as, of course, Vegeta honouring his promise of taking Trunks to an amusement park, as well as copious amounts of Mr. Satan. That's just wonderful. It was the dream start. It was exactly the hype that Super wanted, and thanks to everybody in the West wanting to get a piece of that, because of course we would have wanted to, everybody was keeping an eye on it, including the likes of Kotaku, which pretty much summed up the entire collective Western fanbase's feelings at that time. They heralded the series as a triumph, and so did we. Dragon Ball Super, the new DBZ TV show that takes place after Goku defeats Majin Buu, started airing in Japan last weekend. As a result, English fan translations are also floating around. The first episode clocks in at about 24 minutes, and while it's mostly setup that catches us up on what the gang is up to now, it's still a blast. Note, for watching Dragon Ball Super these days, I totally recommend Crunchyroll, and this is not sponsored. But that quote is a pretty glowing statement, isn't it? Well, that sentiment didn't last. It's a common trope in anime for the first couple of episodes to be really good quality, to be able to suck in new people, as well as actually rekindle new passions for anyone if it's a second series. Once that initial honeymoon period is done and you've actually got a new fandom, you can relax the quality threshold a little bit. The quality of the episodes drops, as I think you've seen many times, and it only goes up again when it needs to, like when there's a crucial point in the story, or at the end of the arc, or at the end of the series. We saw that quite clearly with the infamous Episode 5 of Dragon Ball Super. And boy did our outlook change faster than blinking! The following article from Kotaku's Brian Ashcraft pretty much sums up what everybody thought at the time. It's the foundation of the animosity towards Dragon Ball Super which is still prevalent today. I remember this article being shared by most of my friends, and I actually felt a sort of disdain for the series for a long time, and it was only around the time of the Universe 6 arc when my feelings towards the series softened. But in the days that followed after that article was released, more and more people started to condemn the show. You are not looking at some fan-drawn images. These are official images from Dragon Ball Super's 5th episode. Fan-drawn images probably look better. The images look stiff, rough, and incredibly awkward. Polished, they are not. Crap images are not uncommon in anime, but this is perhaps a tad disappointing because Dragon Ball Super is a big new show. The bar is a bit higher, I guess. It's supposed to be super, right? Also, this was supposed to be the episode's big showdown. As Thomas Romain, one of the few foreigners in animation in Japan, points out that the industry needs to recognize how tough the work environment is. If it does, perhaps not only the work conditions will improve, but the quality of the anime. Ashcraft is right, this was supposed to be a big showdown. The point in Battle of Gods when Goku goes up against Beerus for the first time. It's a big deal, so you need to make sure it looks good. And it didn't. Thankfully they fixed it in the Blu-ray and DVD release. But I think Ashcraft's overall message is a little mixed and confused. At first, it seems like he's lambasting the entire series and condemning everything and saying, "This anime sucks!" But then in the second part of that statement, he's actually going, well, there's a reason for that. He's actually trying to be more rational and quite rightly bringing up the awareness of the harsh working conditions in Japanese animation houses. That is a very good and noble cause to actually bring to light. But it's just a little muddled in that first part. And it really doesn't help that the article's title is really inflammatory and it matches just the first half and doesn't really mention the second half of the quote that I used. It was just, "Dragon Ball Super looks super crappy." Yeah, that's gonna get you clicks. All that Ashcraft's article did was open up a can of worms for Super that has taken months to shake off. And you could actually argue it's still trying to shake off that stigma to this day. But by now, Dragon Ball Super has managed to indeed shake off the issues with bad animation. Some of the latest episodes have actually been pretty remarkable, and the visual direction is stunning. They're actually taking their time and making something that looks lush, vivid, and just the backgrounds and the shading and the lighting, they're actually trying. This last point summates why I made this video. Why you shouldn't compare Dragon Ball Super to Dragon Ball Z. Back in the day, anime in the English-speaking world was harder to come by. I remember it very, very vividly. Like, telling people in the early 2000s I liked anime either brought me out with just really confused stares, or just assuming that all I watched was hentai, which is exactly not the case. Also, the reach of anime was far smaller, so whatever we could find which was halfway decent, we would cling to with as many arms and tentacles and robot arms as we could. Back in the day, we really didn't have a series to compare Dragon Ball Z to, because remember, Dragon Ball didn't come out in the West properly on TV until after DBZ ended. Sure, there were people that caught the Dragon Ball series back in 1995 and 1996, so they had something to compare to, but for the bulk of the fans in America and the UK, we didn't really have that luxury. In comparison, Super has so many eyes on it right now that it just has to make one small misstep for it to be blown out of proportion. Whatever the case, fans are quick to react. It doesn't matter which way you react though, it's okay. People can have opinions, that's not the issue I'm bringing up here. The issue arises when you try to compare Dragon Ball Super to Dragon Ball Z. It's next to impossible. Super doesn't have that nostalgic filter to fall back on, and it has to deal with the handicap of almost instant reviews and coverages and leaks and news. Dragon Ball Z didn't have to worry about that, or at least not as much as it does now. And yes, I admit I am contributing to this notion with my Dragon Ball Super reviews. I am not going to ignore that. Super also has to deal with the fact that it has to come out at a kid-friendly time slot, whereas Dragon Ball Z didn't have to. Wednesday evenings in comparison to Sunday mornings that Super has to deal with. It means that some of the more adult and violent tones of Z cannot be explored in Super, or you have to be much cleverer than you were before and have to be much more innovative in your approach. What I'm trying to say is that Dragon Ball Super is still a part of the Dragon Ball world, but it's its own thing. It's not trying to be a brand new Dragon Ball Z, it's a Dragon Ball series with a different continuation and tone. Like how Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z are two different beasts in their scope and theme. Dragon Ball is all about adventure and comedy, whereas Dragon Ball Z is all about space and action. Super is just the next step in the mystical journey. Let's just celebrate the fact that we have new material for the show and that our fandom is now going strong, stronger than ever before in fact, and that we can share our feelings with like-minded individuals. It's a good time to be a Dragon Ball fan. So what do you guys think? Do you think Super is its own thing? And do you think that Super could actually ultimately be better than Z in the long term? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Until the next one, be sure to like and subscribe. Catch you later!